If you would like to support the channel, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. More information in the description below. The first being was chaos. Chaos is not something that can be understood as a concept nor quantified by any language. It simply was. An abyss, a void, the unreachable matter that filled the gaps between reality. But there was consciousness to chaos, which would present itself in physical form. Eventually emerged Gaia the earth and Eros the source of love and procreation, but directly from the being chaos, its own children emerged. Primordial gods born from one parent, Erebus the darkness and Nyx the night. And from all of them would come many, many more gods and beings, which would found and rule over the heavens, the entirety of the living world, and the underworld. Nyx would be lovingly known as Mother Night. At the dawn of creation, when the children of the Force Chaos were sent to their tasks, Nyx, the direct child of the being called Chaos, was tasked with a great many things from her parent. The expectations set upon her were high, and she was expected to shine as bright as the day, though she was the night. Chaos did not understand the limits of Nyx, nor did it care to learn of them. And the primordial Nyx herself didn't quite know what she was and was not capable of. As a result, as she toiled away on tasks of creation within the underworld, the pressure set upon her by Chaos eventually created a rift between them. The primordial gods created the heavens, the earth, and the underworld, but they wouldn't rule over them. That wasn't in their nature. Instead, the primordials would create a new generation of godly beings and pass their works down to them. From them came the Titans, but oh no, not all the Titans shared their creator's natures. At least one of them, a Titan called Kronos, was vicious, cruel, and a tyrant, a ripe bastard by any measure. The Titans, of course, would go on to have children of their own, the next generation of gods, who would come to despise their Titan parents. That's not to say that these new young gods were righteous and moral beings. In fact, they were quite complex with their motives. Their pettiness, infighting, and bickering was the stuff of legend. But the elder six of these gods decided that their parents needed to be done away with. In particular, Kronos needed to be destroyed. Zeus, Poseidon, Hades, Hera, Hestia, and Demeter united to see it done. Poseidon wielded the Stygian blade, Hades the eternal spear, Hera the heart-seeking bow, Zeus the shield of chaos, Demeter the twin fists, and Hestia the adamant rail. A battle took place deep in Tartarus, the deepest pit of the underworld, and it was the 6 elder children of the Titans who took victory. The Titan called Hyperion, parent to the goddess Demeter, was pulverized by his own daughter Creation. Demeter beat and continued to beat him with the twin fists in a display of brutality that even made her siblings pause and shudder. The once ruler of them all, the Titan Kronos, creator of Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, was cut into pieces and his body parts scattered throughout Tartarus. The Titans who were allowed to live were locked away in the deepest depth of the underworld, and the few who actually aided the 6 elder children were given freedom. In the heavens, which was called Olympus, the children of the Titans rose to power, and lots were handed out. Zeus would rule in Olympus, Poseidon would be god of the seas, Demeter would be goddess of the seasons, Hestia would be goddess of hearth, home, and fire, Hera would be queen in Olympus and the goddess of marriage and women, and as for Hades, he was granted dominion over the entirety of the underworld, a lonely endeavor which would give him governance over the dead. In exchange for unchallengeable rule over the entirety of the underworld, Hades would never be allowed to leave it, and the 3 fates dictated that if he walked the surface, death would soon take him and he would be returned to the depths of Tartarus. The fates could be difficult to interpret, whimsical in their decisions, and sometimes even bargained with, but on this matter they were very clear. Hades could not leave the underworld. Furthermore, he could have no living offspring. No child born from a being from above the underworld could survive there, and he was not from the underworld. Regardless of where his mate was from, he could have no heir. None were better suited for the task of ruling this realm than Hades, and though he accepted the deal, he did not take this lot with happiness in his heart. Joy seemed to be a complete unknown to the new lord of the underworld. Hades' arrival in the underworld was a bit awkward, because remember, it was Mother Night Nyx who created and reigned over it. From Mother Night sprang forth many, many subjects who would serve the underworld. Charon the boatman, Thanatos who was death incarnate, the cheerful and sleepy Hypnos, the aforementioned 3 fates, she brought forth strife and suffering and many, many more that I'm sure I've not become acquainted with yet. But Nyx too acted as an adoptive mother or maternal figure to as many beings as she directly created. She could seem cold, tactical, and sharp, but she would do almost anything for her realm and her children. When compared to the gods of Olympus, the primordial Nyx was a steadfast being. She didn't harbor emotions like envy or loneliness. She was not motivated by ego or a need to control anything. By now, Nyx was aware of her limitations and her wants. She excelled at creation and overseeing the well-being of her offspring, but she was not happy with the day-to-day logistics required to run the underworld, namely, the paperwork. But Hades was masterful in the things that she did not wish to pursue. So a symbiotic relationship was created between them. Hades reigned as lord of the underworld, and he oversaw the running of the realm and the intake of the dead, while Nyx saw to the creation and growth of her children, as she would call them. Hades often showed himself to be temperamental and quick to anger, even lashing out at Mother Night from time to time. But her cool nature and wit often kept the peace between them. Nyx created the House of Hades right in the heart of Tartarus itself. Tartarus was in the lowest reaches of the underworld, where those who lived hateful lives spent their eternity. It was a place of wretched punishment. Above Tartarus was Asphodel, where the majority of those sent to the underworld resided. It was not a torturous place. Rather, it was full of vast meadows where those who lived respectable enough lives walked for eternity. And then above that was Elysium, where the heroes of mankind would walk its sparsely inhabited but beautiful fields. It was the paradise that we might call heaven. Through it ran the Lethe River, whose waters caused the inhabitants of Elysium to forget their mortal lives should they choose to drink from it. Reaching Elysium required a lifetime of impressive feats. Only the most spectacular of mortals could hope to reach it in death. To his brothers, especially Zeus, it was clear that Hades was unhappy and a bit lonely. The stipulations for his reign over the underworld were a bit rough. While the other Olympians did whatever made them happy on Earth and in Olympus, Hades toiled away in a never-ending cycle of work. And he did it alone. Zeus knew this, and he too knew that Hades had eyes for the daughter of Demeter, Persephone, the goddess of verdure. Persephone's father was a mortal man, someone who clearly was very special. Demeter would rarely speak of him, but when he inevitably died, it wounded her heart. She became exceedingly protective of Persephone, smothering, in fact, controlling. Demeter wanted to ensure that her half-mortal daughter was always safe, but in doing so, she created resentment and unhappiness in her daughter. Zeus knew that Persephone was unhappy in Olympus. He knew that Hades had fancied her but never approached. So Zeus did what Zeus does. He acted impulsively. He didn't think through consequences. He catered to his own emotions, and he got involved in fixing this problem as he deemed it. Zeus took Persephone to the underworld and tried to give her to Hades. To his credit, Hades was shocked at this kidnapping and rejected Zeus's supposed gift. Not only was it immoral, but if Demeter found out, there would be war between Olympus and the underworld. But surprisingly, Persephone wasn't against Zeus's idea. Yeah, it was kind of messed up, and the plan of a god who cared little for the well-being of others. Remember, the Olympians were inherently selfish and self-serving, but she didn't oppose it, which must have been a huge shock to Hades. Persephone agreed to stay in the underworld, to be the queen. Knowing the potential consequences for this, they all swore to keep it a secret. It would seem like Persephone had just run away. It wouldn't be difficult to blame it on her mother's need for control. Persephone married Hades, became queen of the underworld, and started a new life. Demeter was devastated by her daughter's disappearance. She became hostile, passive-aggressive, cruel to others, and blanketed the surface of the earth in a never-ending cold. She would spend her days alone, walking the earth, searching for her daughter. Down in the underworld, the queen became a quite beloved figure. She was a kind woman who truly wanted to be a benefit to those around her. And while things were a bit awkward between herself and Hades at first, they grew fond of one another. Eventually, they even loved one another. Hades was better with Persephone around. He never dared act unkind towards her, and she tempered his anger towards others. So adored was the queen that even the frightening, non-speaking boatman Charon would act in her favor. The great three-headed dog Cerberus was like a pup in her presence. Persephone and Nyx became quick friends and came to share a strong bond. The House of Hades was peaceful with the queen around, and Nyx didn't have to face off against Hades' temper or impatience. With time, they became more like sisters than friends. But despite her welcome to the underworld, Persephone always felt rather out of place, like she didn't quite belong there, like she was an intruder or someone who didn't have a purpose. That feeling always clung to the back of her mind. She doubted that anyone would really miss her if she was gone. Hades never forgot the ruling of the fates, though. He could have no heir. So when Persephone became pregnant, fear crept into the mighty god. Neither he nor Persephone were beings from the underworld, and no child born from a being of the surface could survive here. Yet they tried. They had hope. Persephone chose the name Zagreus for the child, but the child did not survive the birth. Little Zagreus was stillborn. Persephone was so consumed by grief that she fled. She left a note for Hades, said goodbye to Cerberus, and called in a favor with the boatman Charon for passage to the surface. She chose to reside someplace between heaven and hell, the coast of Greece. The goddess of verdure made herself a small home and created a magnificent garden to soothe herself. There she stayed, alone and in hiding. The lord of the underworld, too, was stricken with grief over the loss of his son, but Hades did not show emotion easily. He lost Zagreus and then he lost Persephone. He doubted her true love for him, doubted himself, allowed negative emotion to rule, and he decided to not go after her. She probably hated him anyways. He and the beings of the underworld let the queen go, but his son, Zagreus, he could not give up on that. He took the baby's body to Mother Night Nyx and begged for her help. Nyx had positive relations with the gods of Olympus. She was mother and surrogate mother to countless beings in the underworld. She was as powerful as the darkness of night was consuming. She could have chosen at any point to make Hades' life an absolute nightmare. But that was not in her nature. Nyx agreed to try, to do what she could. Mother Night went to her daughters, the three Fates, and began to bargain. Though she was their mother, the Fates did not answer to her, and Nyx seemed quite obedient to their commands. Nyx did all of this with fear in her heart, but she bargained with her daughters for a very long time before they struck a deal. The conditions for it were unknown to all save Nyx, who would never tell a soul what it was. But Mother Night succeeded. Life returned to Zagreus. Not knowing where Persephone vanished to, and unwilling to risk rejection or deepening her grief, Hades decided to not tell her that Zagreus was alive. The boy's future was so uncertain anyways. What if he died young? No, they would trouble Persephone no more. Hades asked Nyx if she would help raise the boy, if she would pose as his mother. A union between Nyx and Hades was at best extremely unlikely, but no one in the underworld would dare question them. Hades was frightening, but Nyx could be apocalyptic. She agreed, and it was accepted that Nyx, Mother Night, had given birth to the prince of the underworld, Zagreus. Hades fell back into old habits after Persephone left the underworld. He was moody, angry, impatient. Nothing was good enough for him. He had no kind words to give, but he was damn good at his job. Though Nyx raised Zagreus, Hades was still an active part of his life, in pretty negative ways. As the boy grew, he became a target for his father's anger. Any lesson Hades imparted on his son came from negativity or a demand for perfection. But Zagreus had his father's tenacity, his mother's good nature, and Nyx's backbone. He grew to very much dislike his father, but he didn't hate him. Zagreus didn't really hate anything, but his childhood was difficult because of Hades. When the boy was old enough, his father decided to have him martially trained. He himself was a great warrior, but Hades did not have time to train Zagreus, so that job went to a shade named Achilles. It was said that in life, Achilles was the greatest fighter that ever lived. There would be none better suited for the task than he. Achilles agreed to enter into employment with the House of Hades, but only if the man that he loved in life was allowed to enter Elysium in his place. Achilles would never be able to leave the House of Hades. He would never be able to return to Elysium to find his love, to tell him of the bargain. But Achilles took comfort in knowing that the love of his life would get to spend eternity in paradise, even if it was without him. Zagreus was a natural fighter, and with Achilles as his mentor, he became a whirlwind of power. The life lessons and gentle nature of his teacher rubbed off on Zagreus. He truly respected Achilles and listened to his every gentle word. Under the influences of Achilles and Nyx, Zagreus grew into an ever-smiling youth without a single mean bone in his body, which seemed to endlessly irritate his father. Everyone in the underworld served a purpose. They were the god or incarnation of something. But Zagreus kinda didn't. He was a spectacular fighter, and he shared his father's resistance to fire. He could die, but he would just be reborn in the pool of sticks within his father's house. Zagreus was pretty immature and lazy, too. He wasn't the god or incarnation of anything, so when he was old enough, his father decided to put him to work. Presumably one day, Zagreus would take over his work as Lord of the Underworld, so he would start his training in the administrative offices of the house. And boy oh boy did Zagreus not excel at it. Though that honestly wasn't entirely his fault either. His father didn't train him, like, at all. He just expected Zagreus to pick up on things, which he didn't, which just made his father more upset, which frustrated Zagreus. Hades would yell, "That's wrong, incorrect," while not actually showing Zagreus what to do. For a time, Zagreus had a relationship with one of the Furies, Megara, though it seemed a brief one. She was a perpetually serious being who very much valued her work. Meanwhile, Zagreus was the sort to oversleep and have a messy bedroom. Their split didn't seem outright hostile, though Megara would treat Zagreus with contempt and kept their interactions quite brief. He did have a strong friendship with Thanatos, the incarnation of death, son of Nyx, and brother to Hypnos. Thanatos was also a consummate professional and a very serious fellow, but he had a fondness for Zagreus. So when things were tough, there was always somebody that Zagreus could turn to for advice. Thanatos, Achilles, Nyx, Cerberus probably had a lot of advice to give too. Even the carefree, sleepy Hypnos could be a source of comfort in trying times, or he could be a partner in crime. Zagreus was curious about his father's belongings, specifically what he kept in his work desk. He had never been allowed near Hades' private quarters, and his father was an absolute fortress when it came to personal matters. Maybe it was just some mischief, maybe it was a desire to know more about his dad. Zagreus decided that he was going to do a little snooping. The prince had always felt like something was off about his life, like he didn't belong, like there was a secret being held from him. Zagreus schemed with Hypnos to have everyone in the House of Hades put into a deep sleep. As the house slumbered, he stealthed his way through the halls of his father, and he began to go through his desk. There were several unanswered letters from Olympus tucked away, but for the most part it was just paperwork. But in the corner, Zagreus found something out of place, a note written in fine handwriting. It was from a woman named Persephone, written to his father. She couldn't tolerate being there anymore, so she left, even if it meant death. She was going to the surface, not to Olympus. It ended with a request that he take care of Cerberus. Though not an outright hostile letter, there wasn't any fondness conveyed in it either. It did betray that this Persephone was well acquainted with his father, and a voice betrayed to Zagreus that the woman who wrote this was his mother. And just like that, his entire world was flipped upside down. That means that Nyx lied to him. They all lied to him. The people that were supposed to care for him. His entire life had just been a lie. He decided then and there that he had to find Persephone on the surface, and he was going to confront his father about this immediately. But Mother Night intercepted him in the hallway. He demanded to know why she lied to him his whole life, and though she expressed regret at his discovery, she decided that she would not deny him the truth. He only had half the story, and she would tell him just a bit more. Though she could not fill in all the details for him, Nyx told him the broad story of Persephone's time in the underworld as she understood it. She did not presume to tell him anything of his mother's motivations, though. When Persephone fled, Nyx cast a shroud of shadow around her to keep her safely hidden away from the Olympians who may still be searching for her. And she did the same for Zagreus. None of his distant relatives even know of his existence. Zagreus told her that he wanted to leave the underworld to go to the surface. It was a brazen plan that would no doubt enrage Hades, but she did not wish to deny Zagreus a chance to find his mother. And Persephone was her friend. Keeping these secrets all these years wasn't easy for Nyx. She could be cold, but she was far from heartless. So Nyx did something extraordinary. She contacted the goddess Athena, the goddess of wisdom. Athena was by far the most rational and reasonable of the Olympians. Nyx withheld the truth of Persephone. She continued to play the role of Zagreus' mother, and she told Athena that he wished to leave the underworld so that he could meet all of them in Olympus. The gods of Olympus would all jump at the chance to meet a new mysterious family member, one from the underworld no less. Athena took this exciting news to all of her brethren, and they all agreed to help Zagreus in any way they could. They would send their boons to the underworld for him, bits of their power that they could lend. But Nyx ensured that the shroud concealing Zagreus would stay in place, so the Olympians might hear Zagreus for short times, but not see him. Once everything was set up, after a particularly bad fight with his father in the admin office, Zagreus took the Stygian blade and left the house of Hades. Want to help support the channels? You can become a patron on Patreon, a YouTube member, or a Twitch sub. For just a few bucks a month, you can help keep the channel going and get a couple cool perks while you're at it, like supporter-only streams, extra and early content, and your name in the lore video credits. Check the description of the video for more information on how to support the channel. And while you're at it, why don't you come see us in the Discord too? Or find me on one of those other social media platforms that the kids are so into these days. But that's enough from me. Thank you for watching the video, and let's get back to the lore. Hades, god of the dead, lord of the underworld, was well aware of his son's plan, and he hid his concerns behind his usual demeaning attitude. Of course, he knew the truth of Persephone's departure. A conversation with his son would have remedied everything, but he refused. Instead, he ordered the Wraiths of the underworld to stop Zagreus. He ordered the Fury Megara to attack him if he tried to leave Tartarus. Those orders went up through every level of the underworld. Every venture out of the house of Hades would be riddled with violence and death, but Zagreus didn't care. He wanted so badly to find his mother that he was willing to die over and over and over again. Every failure would be a new lesson. Each room would get him a sliver more power. Early into his very first run, he finds the boon of Athena, just what he was looking for. If what Nyx said was correct, Athena would rally the gods of Olympus to aid him with their boons once he began his escape attempts. The goddess of wisdom is straight and to the point, and quite reassuring. Zagreus will have the powers of his faraway family to help him through this. A few rooms later, he finds a new boon, that of Artemis, the goddess of the hunt. Athena has already rallied the family, and they stand ready. Artemis is rough around the edges, but clearly has a hint of excitement in her voice at the prospect of helping a new family member. His first attempt to reach the surface didn't last long, only a few rooms, before he was beaten to death and sent back to the pool of sticks within his father's house. Hypnos, son of Nyx, brother of Thanatos, is the greeter for all who emerge from the pool. But usually he's sleepily greeting shades, not the prince of the underworld. He is so damned pleasant and cheerful, though he's supposed to be working, ushering in the dead, and he is perpetually seriously behind schedule. That doesn't bother him, though. Even if it bothers other people, even if they snap at him, he remains his usual cheery self. Achilles, too, greets him. The warrior has been a confidant and guide for the prince for so long, it feels natural to go to him after a setback. He reminds Zagreus that, for him, death is just an obstacle. His own father, though, isn't nearly as approachable. The first thing he does is call Zagreus stupid, and then he discourages his son's efforts. The prince counters his father's rude pessimism with light sarcasm, though the disdain in Zagreus' voice is hard to miss. It may not be true, but it sure seems like these two hate one another. Cerberus is different, though. He may be the terrifying hound of hell, but in the House of Hades, he's kind of the family dog and the absolute best boy who deserves all the head pats. The last person in the halls of the house is Nyx, who is a comfort to the prince. Mother Night can be unkind and snappy at beings far below her station, but when it comes to her children or the beings she's raised and taken care of, she is a source of counsel and encouragement. Zagreus in particular is quite comfortable approaching her directly, and she reassures him, like Achilles, that setbacks and death are inevitable, and they can be overcome. What matters most right now is he's made contact with Athena. She will rally the Olympians to aid him. Before his next attempt, in the courtyard outside his bedroom, Zagreus switches out the Stygian blade for the Heartseeker bow, and a new face pops up, a skeleton, with apparently a fetish for getting the piss beaten out of him. His name is Skelly. He doesn't say where he's from, what his motives are, just that he really wants Zagreus to smack him around. If he gets destroyed, he'll reform again in just a few moments. And Zagreus doesn't really stop to question Skelly's presence. He'll just be the prince's training dummy when he unlocks new weapons, at least for now. Nah, I'm just kidding. Skelly's a cool bean. The next Olympian Zagreus meets is the king himself, Zeus. He's more than happy to throw a little shade at Hades for his self-imposed isolation and promises his nephew that he'll have a better home on Olympus with his family. His blessings are powerful, all the Olympian blessings are, and they offer them with no expectations for returned favors. There is something about this that feels kinda bad, though. The gods of Olympus, his extended family, they think they're helping him leave the underworld because he wants to go be with them, but he just wants to find his mother. Maybe he will want to go live on Olympus after the fact. It's not what motivates him right now, though. He's misleading them, and their enthusiasm is a little bit guilt-inducing. Artemis and Zeus are his boon givers this time through, and he makes it much farther with their powers. He makes it all the way to the end of Tartarus where his ex is waiting, Megara the Fury, but she's all business. Hades sent her here to stop Zagreus from leaving this level of the underworld, and she's all too happy to resort to violence. Megara is one of 3 Furies, her sisters being Alecto and Tisiphone, but she's the only of the 3 sisters allowed in the House of Hades. One of them is just absolutely terrifying, and the other is insubordinate and uncontrollable. Meg is definitely the most reasonable and normal of the 3. The Furies are the enforcers and punishers of Tartarus, but Meg's sisters are a way to handle other affairs in the underworld. Seems there's a war taking place on the surface, and the Furies are working overtime to deal with all the new shades requiring punishment within the depths. It's by the skin of his teeth that Zagreus defeats her, and he comes out of this fight bloodied. She may not have outright stopped Zagreus here, but the damage she inflicted will see him done in soon enough. The next level of the underworld is Asphodel, which was once a sprawling land of lovely meadows. But, well, the fiery river Phlegethon kinda flooded it. Cleaning this place up is going to be a logistical nightmare. Not even Zagreus' resistance to fire will keep him safe. The next Olympian he meets is the mighty Ares, god of war. Though he can hear the cries of war coming from the boon, the god himself is approachable enough as the two seem to have something in common: violence. Zagreus is killing his way through the underworld, which is enough to get him this particular god's favor. And then he meets another uncle, the unstoppable Poseidon, who seems a bit of a troublemaker but with a more agreeable sense of humor than Zeus. It would still be wise to not push or test him, though. For now, he is firmly on the side of his nephew. On this first attempt through Asphodel, Zagreus makes it all the way to the end of this realm and is met by his next obstacle, the Bone Hydra, Lernie. It doesn't speak, doesn't seem to listen, doesn't appear to have any interest other than fight. And the prince never quite recovered from his fight with Meg. He does make it a surprising ways through the fight, but is ultimately killed by Lernie, the Bone Hydra. That is going to be one hell of an obstacle to get past if he can't get some big boy power boosts. Back in the House of Hades, Hypnos gives his usual greeting, but the sound of a disagreement taking place is echoing around the hall. It's Hades versus Nyx. Seems his father wasn't aware of Nyx's contact with Athena and the aid that Zagreus was getting from the other gods of Olympus, and her actions are making him paranoid. She is having none of it, though. In a very Nyx way, she tells him to pump the brakes and calm down. His accusations are easily put to rest with truth and logic, which Mother Night always seems to be prepared with. When Hades calls her actions a foolish mistake, she reminds him of his own choices of the past. He has no room to judge her deeds, nor to deem them foolish. Apparently, after Zagreus vanished, Cerberus had a big meltdown and tore apart the lounge. Poor kid. So Megara is standing outside in the hall. Her greeting isn't a warm one. Her concerns are for her reputation. She tells him that if he wins against her, he needs to make it all the way to the surface. Can't have him looking like a weak punk. The next weapon Zagreus will take out is the Shield of Chaos, once used by his uncle Zeus during their battle with the Titans long ago. Time to settle in and really let the grind begin. The prince of the underworld will die over and over and over again. He meets the rest of his family while he ventures, the goddess of love Aphrodite, who Achilles himself believes to be the most lethally powerful and terrible of all the gods, for crashing waves and thundering tempests are nothing compared to a broken heart. He speaks often with the family he's already met, like Zeus and Ares. He battles Megara many times over with varying degrees of success, because remember, she is far from a pushover. In Asphodel, he meets a nymph named Eurydice whose voice is angelic. She offers him wonderful food that enhances his abilities, but Zagreus never seems to have time to stay and talk. He often finds himself in the company of the boatman Charon, whose terrifying visage really never seemed to bother Zagreus. He speaks to Charon as though he's an old familiar friend and he's more than happy to see him again, and the boatman somehow seems content when the prince visits. Back at the house of Hades, his father taunts his every return with snide commentary on his failures. Achilles offers his encouragements, as does Nyx. He makes additions to the house, works on getting the lounge Cerberus tore up open for business again. He unlocks new weapons like the Eternal Spear. Eventually, he's able to vanquish the Bone Hydra and ascends to the next level, Elysium, where the heroes of mankind spend their afterlife walking the paradise fields. Except right now, everything and everyone is out to get him by order of Lord Hades. The beings here are punching bags that just seem to soak his hits. The prince does not last long. Death takes him quickly back to the house of Hades. His next journey out, he meets the god of wine, Dionysus, the resident party boy of Olympus. He seems like a chill, welcoming dude, but he'll do anything to avoid downers. When his worshippers die in life, he sort of just leaves them to die alone, because death is such a bummer, right? He's certainly the most outright pleasant of the gods that Zagreus has met thus far. Not as supportive as Athena, but a close second. Uncle Poseidon pops in to say hello again, and then a strange room. Zagreus has to choose between Poseidon or Dionysus. He chooses the boon of his uncle, and then the pettiness really starts to show. Dionysus feels personally affronted at not being picked, and he sends some hostiles towards Zagreus to express his disappointment. These choices will bring out the bad side of whoever isn't picked. Even Athena will be pissed at any form of rejection. It puts on display how volatile the temperament of the Olympians can actually be, and serves as a reminder that all of them will turn on him immediately if they feel vindicated in doing so. And once their tantrum is over, they'll each pretend like nothing bad ever happened. What even were they fighting about anyways? On this run, Megara bests him, sending him back to his father's house, where of course the two have their jabs at one another. This time, the prince's dirty room is the focus of Hades' ire. Zagreus points out the piles of papers on his father's own desk, and he snaps, "What happened to the court musician Orpheus? Where's his sentencing parchment work under all that clutter?" Hades takes the bait, tells the prince that if he's so concerned, that he can handle the paperwork himself, which Zagreus immediately does. Orpheus had stopped singing for some reason, which made Hades upset, so he sent him into Tartarus for solitary confinement. Zagreus commutes the musician's sentence and orders the house contractors to have Orpheus delivered back to the house. This guy has been through some stuff, but he doesn't really want to talk about it. He still doesn't want to sing. No matter what Hades demands from him, he can't bring himself to sing without his muse, his wife, his long-lost love. A new face greets Zagreus on his next run, Hermes, god of swiftness, and Hermes is so much more than he seems. He's the only of the Olympians that works with the underworld. He has ties to the boatman Charon, in fact. He takes souls of the dead straight to Charon, and Hermes knows a thing or 10 about Persephone, Hades, Zagreus, and the goings-ons in the underworld. But he has kept it all to himself. Maybe to be a bro, but more likely, he'll find a benefit for himself in it somehow. He is a trickster god, after all. The swift favors of Hermes do well with the blessings from Ares and Aphrodite that Zagreus obtained this run. The prince comes across another new face, Sisyphus, the once king who somehow landed himself in the depths of Tartarus to forever be tormented by the Furies. He's strangely delightful, though. His time here has tempered out whatever spirit got him here in the first place. When the Furies are away, he is perpetually pushing this giant boulder up an incline, until inevitably it just rolls back down and he has to repeat the process. They exchange pleasantries. Sisyphus gives him an offering of resources to help him on his way, and then the two part. This time, Zagreus makes it past Meg, through Asphodel, he beats the Bone Hydra, and makes it all the way to Elysium well-stocked and powered up. The going here is still slow and difficult, but he's able to crawl his way through the gauntlet that is this realm. The boons here are magnificent, the scenery is lovely, and the final obstacle, interesting. These two beings stop him at the gates leading out of Elysium. Theseus, another once king and a hero of Athens, and at his side is the bull of Minos, Asterius. They both have been waiting for him in this arena. Zagreus knows these names. They are the stuff of legends. But as all who came before, they're here to stop Zagreus, and they have no interest in a fair fight. Both Theseus and Asterius unload on Zagreus. In life, Theseus performed great deeds in his youth that ensured him a place in Elysium in death. He was called the greatest king of Athens, and he serves much the same in Elysium, a king. Long ago, Theseus hunted down and killed Asterius, the bull of Minos. The Minotaur was a terror to the coast of Greece, residing within a labyrinth, which he thankfully had no escape from. Theseus went to the labyrinth and the two battled. It was an encounter that was nigh mythic. Theseus ultimately won, sending Asterius to the dreaded Erebus within the underworld. But Theseus viewed the Minotaur as his greatest rival, and he honored him for it. When Theseus died and went to Elysium, he searched out Asterius, and he risked asking Hades to allow the Minotaur to reside in Elysium at his side. His request was granted, and here the two have been ever since. The fight between the three is a long one, which Zagreus takes victory in, just barely. His ability to defy death combined with the powerful Olympian favors he'd obtained is what made it possible. There is still one more area yet that blocks his way forward, the Temple of Styx. Through the doors of the temple is the surface, the outside world, but sitting in front of the doors is Cerberus. The Hellhound has been tasked with stopping Zagreus. In a cruel twist of fate, this is to be his final challenge. His best bud, his rotten soldier, his good time boy has to be dealt with. He needs a snack, not a fight. There's been a bit of a satyr infestation in the temple, but Cerberus loves satyr sacks. God knows what's actually in them, but if that's what the Hound of Hell wants, then that is what he will get. Zagreus must choose a path and walk the random halls of the temple in search for a treat for Cerberus. Hard to say where this infestation of rodents of unusual size came from, and all the wild satyrs creating havoc. Each step here is a gamble because any moment there could be a pool of rat poison under your foot, a laser beam could lock onto you and nuke you from orbit, there could be a landmine waiting for you, or just some nasty dancing goatmen that apparently worship the vermin infesting the temple. The satyr absolutely loathe Hades, but it's not really clear what they want. They're far enough away that the Lord of the Underworld can't easily deal with them, but they're enough of a nuisance that they really do need to be handled. Zagreus' time here is up to luck. He can find the satyr sack Cerberus wants down the first hallway, or he can get stuck clearing every single one before he finds it. This first time through, the prince finds the nummy sack of goodies on his second set of hallways, right next to a blessing from Zeus. He's able to completely heal up, make one last round of purchases from Charon if he can afford it, and then it's time to feed Cerberus and see what's beyond the final gate, see what the surface is like. Faithful Cerberus gleefully accepts his good friend's offering and steps aside to let him on his way. There's an intense feeling of cold up here. Something called snow is falling from someplace. The prince is taken aback at the sight, but his wonder is ruined by the sight of his father. Of course, he says. Hades casually says he never got used to the air up here and the way the gusts moved, though he imagines Zagreus quite prefers it. The prince is agreeable enough, though he knows his father is wearing the Helm of Darkness, which means that he's here to fight, not have a superficial conversation about the weather. Hades makes this his son's fault, and bemoans that while the prince went about his antics, he always kept his anger controlled. Yet, he also berated Zagreus, lied to him, sent minions to kill him. Not unleashing rage doesn't make Hades Dad of the Year. He had quite thought himself above his family in Olympus when it came to killing other gods, but the god of the dead is sending his son home. Hades is by far the hardest-hitting combatant from this journey. He doesn't hold back against his son. In fact, it almost seems like an outlet for him. While Zagreus is consumed by his own motivations, Hades too has wants and beliefs that he's fighting for, and he is completely unwilling to share what those things are. He acts as an obstacle now. To him, that's how he best serves his own interests. His swing arc is massive, he can summon minions, he vanishes into the shadows only to charge out quite suddenly with a large hit. All of it comes together to just be too much for the prince. Hades soundly defeats him and sends his son home, as he says, nothing to show for it. Back at the house, Hypnos is the first to greet him as usual, but his list says that Zagreus was killed by Redacted, which he's never seen before. And that means that all things considered, Lord Hades is many things, but a killer isn't one. Cerberus is back in his usual spot, but Hades is still away, probably on the surface. At least he won't have to hear his dad gloat over the royal thrashing he dealt to Zagreus. He really did just royally beat his ass into the ground. He'll have to be more careful of the favors he collects on his way up. Orpheus asks if he's ever met another court musician who lost their will to sing. He can't seem to find the words to explain himself to Lord Hades, but Zagreus assures him that it's probably happened many times before. The prince excitedly tells Nyx that he did it. He made it to the surface. He couldn't defeat his father, but he was closer than ever before, and she continues to encourage him. This too was just one setback of many that he can overcome with time and effort. And the lounge is finally back open, though still covered in Cerberus's hair and claw marks. The little guy had one heck of a tantrum from the looks of it. Meg is there, drinking, being angry and withdrawn, and a little weird. Dusa, one of the house servants, is going about her work, trying to clean up after Cerberus. Once upon a time, the House of Hades was a bit of a mess. Hades himself never bothered with cleaning, Zagreus was nothing but a contributor to it, so Dusa was hired to tend to the household. And she has done a wonderful job turning it around, though Nyx is quite stern with her and treats her like an irritating employee that only exists to be bossed around. Dusa handles it well, but she's extremely neurotic about her performance and avoids speaking with Zagreus quite often. Nyx frequently reminds her not to bother the prince and to focus on her work. The next weapon Zagreus takes out is Malphon, the twin fists, and the best weapon in his arsenal if you ask me. The goddess of the seasons, Demeter, used these during the Titan War to pulverize her father Hyperion in a particularly graphic display of brutality. Now, Zagreus gets a turn with them. He meets a new family member quite soon into this next run. He feels the cold of her power before he sees her. It's the Lady Demeter herself. She knows that he is trying to escape, but she's uncertain as to why he would want to do that. Leave the darkness for the cold? Regardless, she promises that she will aid him, despite the involvement of the other gods of Olympus. The cycle of grinding, dying, powering up, buying, dying again, getting boons, chatting with gods, dying again, giving gifts, talking to friends, dying again, starts anew. But he is clearing zones faster, downing bosses quicker, taking less damage with each new run. Soon, reaching Elysium is a relatively simple task, with Megara consistently being his biggest obstacle. It's actually within Elysium that Zagreus finds something quite unique, a portal that requires a sacrifice of his health to enter. It takes him to a place called Chaos, where he could never reach without the express permission of the being Chaos. He has been invited here. The first words out of Chaos's mouth to him are some shade towards the Olympian gods. They've all grown soft, wouldn't he agree? Chaos is unique in all of this. They are the oldest primordial being, the originator of everything, and though they lack any warmth or understanding of emotion, they are a bit spicy. Chaos will help the prince along, but it won't be gifts that they give. The prince has to earn their favor. He may take their boon, but with it a penalty. If he can satisfy the conditions of their power, generally being greatly hindered for a number of chambers, then he will get the favor of Chaos. Later, again in the fields of Elysium, Zagreus hears a man talking to himself. He's upset, sad, desperate. He's speaking of someone who prolonged a war, who could have chosen to have ended it, who was somewhere else while he lingered on here. This shade asks Zagreus to move on. He's not interested in fighting the prince, which is a relief for Zagreus to hear. He asks the shade's name, but the mysterious being won't give it. He just says that names are there to be forgotten, but he will offer this kind young stranger a small favor to help him on his way. Once Zagreus has chosen his gift, the man asks to be left alone. At his next visit to the surface, with the twin fists still as his weapon, he is well prepared for another fight with his father. Hades is melancholic and speaks of the sea, the heavens, and the earth, the domains of his brothers, where they are foreigners. Zagreus doesn't care for his father's mood, though. He tells him to get out of the way, but that's certainly not going to happen. Zagreus intentionally opted for speed in his build, so he could avoid his father's massive swings and sudden charges. The twin fists are blindingly fast, making his damage output a chronic source of chip damage that wheedles Hades' health down far faster than his previous attempt. The field is chaos, but the prince focuses his father down and takes the fight with a healthy pool of life on reserve. And his lord father is having none of it. He would expect this sort of hateful fighting from his brothers, but his own child? No, this isn't over. He is the god of the dead, and just like Zagreus, he can defy death. His health pool completely refills, and round 2 begins. There's a moment of confusion from the prince, as this feels wildly unreasonable, but he has had plenty of time to warm up and learn to dodge his father's abilities. The chaos will grow, the field will become more hazardous, but round 2 is just perfecting on what he practiced in the first one. What he absolutely cannot do in this phase is get lazy, stop dodging, stay stationary, or get impatient. Somehow, this stretch of fighting is shorter than the first. Zagreus has his father's number when it comes to these fights, and he takes victory. It's undeniable, too. Hades can't undermine it or steal it away. He tells his son to just go, and then yells at him to get out. But then he changes his mind. He tells Zagreus that if he does see her, to tell his mother that Cerberus is doing very well. Zagreus agrees to consider it if his father will answer a question. Why did his mother leave? Before Hades can give an answer, death takes him. Just like his son, he'll be taken back to the house, where he will emerge from the pool of sticks good as new. Zagreus says goodbye to his father. He has no intention to return, and he leaves the snowy field behind to begin the search for his mother. As he slowly walks through the cold, he recalls the directions he was given by Nyx. Beyond the frozen outlook, wait for the first glimpse of the sun to your left, then onward through the cold. The surface is unlike anything he's ever seen. Snow, grass, lush trees, mountains, the sea itself, the realm of his uncle Poseidon. A slight cough hits him as he walks, but the glorious sunrise takes his complete attention. He's heard of the sun, but he's never seen it, and the cliffs he's standing on are overlooking the coastline of Greece itself. As he was directed to do, he continues on through the cold and comes to a break in the snow. He finds a surreal, gorgeous, sprawling garden covered in warm sunlight, and a woman there quickly calls out to him, asking who he is and why he's trespassing on her private property. He says that she must be Persephone, which she doesn't say no to or correct, so he says that he is Zagreus, her son, and that enrages her. She yells and orders him to get out, but he doesn't try to stop her anger. He asks why she left him, and his honest inquiry stops her. She says that he died, and she saw him dead at his birth. How could it be that he's here now, fully grown, standing before her? And this is the first time that he's been told that he entered the world dead, permanently dead, and his mother had no idea that somehow he wasn't. Knowing that Hades had even called him Zagreus, the name that they chose during her pregnancy, is enough to convince her. Despite her countless questions, she welcomes Zagreus to her home, and for a time the two of them just talk. The prince tells the once queen of the underworld about his fight to reach her, of his trials and setbacks, of ultimately defeating his father in combat. He even delivers his father's message. Cerberus is doing very well. But how even did he find her, she asks. This all seems unbelievable, but Zagreus starts looking sickly, and he gasps for words like he's in pain. He claims he must just be a bit tired, unaccustomed to the weather up here, but something is very clearly wrong with the prince, and Persephone knows exactly what it is. He is more like his father than he realizes. He too cannot walk the surface. Zagreus may not stay here. He is bound to the underworld, and it will force him to return. His mother quickly tells him how happy she is to know that he's alive, and her heart breaks at the far too soon parting. Zagreus says that he will come back, and maybe Hades will allow it now too, and Persephone orders her son to tell her husband that she demands it. And she demands Hades or Nyx also tell her why word was never sent of his existence. She wants a truthful explanation, lest they prove themselves no better than the schemers on Olympus. Zagreus knows that the end approaches, and Persephone asks him to return to her. No matter how long it takes, she will be waiting for him. The prince is claimed by the river Styx and forced back to his father's house. Zagreus moves to confront his father as soon as he is out of the pool. But Hades acts as though nothing has happened, as though Zagreus didn't overcome his many obstacles, defeat him in combat, and find his mother. Hades laughs and pretends like he has no idea what he's on about, which is such an odd way for him to react. He's clearly trying to work through something, and it's brought out a strange side to Hades. Zagreus presses him on it, demands passage to see his mother again, but Hades refuses to discuss it, acknowledge it, or even humor his son. But if his father won't face the problem here, then he'll force him to on the surface when next they fight. There will be no safe passage despite the demands of Persephone. Hades is just trying to pretend that it never even happened. Nyx, however, does not. She's excited to hear that he succeeded, or as excited as Nyx can be. She asks to hear all about it, and Zagreus immediately opens up, and he asks her why she didn't tell him that he couldn't survive up there. And she says that, well, she didn't know. Or maybe she wished it wouldn't be true and that he wouldn't share his father's fate. He's able to piece together things just fine and understands what this will ultimately mean for him. He cannot leave to be with his mother. But Nyx asks him, if you knew that you could only see Persephone for but a moment's time, would you still make the journey to see her? He's still confused about everything, but his answer is quick and decisive. Yes, he would. So she encourages him to go, to steady himself knowing what will happen in the end. He makes his rounds about the house, speaking with others who walk its halls, and prepares for his next trip out. Now he has the option of taking conditions from the Pact of Punishment. Each one will make his escape a little bit more difficult, but are interesting as hell and absolute musts when venturing out. Like the extreme measures condition when it's available. Bump that bad boy up and give it a go. Trust me. The gods of Olympus expressed confusion at Zagreus' return to the underworld. They could have sworn that he was much closer to the surface than this. Did he get defeated in the end? There must be some sort of a vicious monstrosity guarding the way out. But they encourage him to keep at it, in their unique, sometimes concerning ways. The prince also starts giving out more gifts, to the gods and to friends that he chances across along the way. Bottles of delicious nectar. With each gift, their fondness for him grows, even if they insist that such things aren't necessary. He faces off in solo combat against Asterius, the bull of Minos in the fields of Elysium, starts fishing in random pools that he finds around the underworld, trolls King Theseus every chance he gets because the guy cannot take a joke and has no sense of self-awareness. He's really obsessed with Asterius being his friend and not Zagreus's. And then his father. Hades mocks his efforts, calling it utterly senseless. After all, if he insults it, it doesn't show how deeply the whole situation hurts. If he's hostile, then he doesn't have to have a difficult conversation with his son. If he pretends he doesn't care, he doesn't have to answer for past choices. Zagreus asks why Hades didn't tell Persephone the truth, why he left her to her grief, but he refuses to answer. The two of them butt heads again, with Zagreus taking the victory, this time a bit faster and easier than before. He'll be seeing his father soon enough again, no time to gloat. He runs through the hills to his mother's house, taking a bit more notice of all the vegetation growing around her home. There's stuff growing here that he has never seen before. This place must smell wonderful. And Persephone is thrilled to see him, and she asks how his trip was. He discloses that his father did not give him passage or make things any easier for him, nor did he answer any of their questions. But his mother says to speak and ask as much of her as he would like. So he asks what happened between her and his father. Why is she here and not in the underworld? She says that she just couldn't stand to be there anymore. She didn't feel like she belonged, though Zagreus says that everyone who spoke of her down there did so with fondness. So did Hades mistreat her? But she assures him that no, Hades was never unkind towards her. They actually got on very well, but after he was stillborn, her grief drove her away. She fled to some place above the notice of the underworld and beneath the notice of Olympus. She didn't know why Hades kept Zagreus' life a secret, though. The prince's life is fading, they're almost out of time, so Persephone asks him to take another question to Hades on her behalf. She wants to know why he lied to her, too. When Zagreus returns home, Orpheus is the focus of his father's ire. He'll have to wait to have a discussion with him. Hades wants his court musicians to play music and to quit being withdrawn, or else he might be punished again, but Orpheus doesn't give in, not even a little, not even to Hades, which Hades actually responds well to. It's like he appreciates that Orpheus has a backbone. He doesn't have Orpheus imprisoned again, instead just gives a stern fine. Since his father is busy, Zagreus moves on to Nyx and asks why she kept secrets from Persephone. His foster mother says that she swore an oath long ago not to. Nyx is a stern being, and not the sort to give up on a promise. She has done everything she can to circumvent that vow, and she's done her best to act in Persephone's best interests too. It's not the answer that Zagreus really wanted, but it's fair, and it's one that he can't argue with. He attends to his affairs around the house, unlocks his final weapon, the adamant rail, and ships out for another run through the underworld. Not only are his relationships deepening with the other gods and residents of the underworld, but his attempts are becoming a bit more enjoyable. Zagreus is starting to face roll his father's minions, his fights with Meg, the Bone Hydra, Theseus, and Asterius are faster and he takes less damage. He's able to tell when favors will have synergy with one another, and the dangers of Chaos's offered powers are less daunting. He learns more from the gods that he interacts with and gives gifts to, in particular Demeter. She gives away little bits of information that relay her sadness at losing a child and her contempt for the world now. She says that she lost a daughter, that she was foolish from the start, now only the cold remains. On the surface, once again confronting his son, Hades discloses that Zagreus' return to life took all of Nyx's strength. So, she was the one who saved him, Mother Night, ever true to her name. The prince's death should have been a certainty, and it would have been if not for her. Zagreus is intent on picking every aspect of this tragedy apart so that he can blame his father. He accuses his father of lying about what the fates told him, that he'd made it up because it was a convenient excuse, but Hades doesn't let that one go. He tells his son outright that his reign in the underworld came with conditions, one being that he would never have an heir. When Zagreus pushes again, Hades just stops the talk. He's had enough of his son's accusations. The two of them fight once again, and Zagreus takes his third victory. They'll see each other again soon enough, and they'll have plenty to talk about. But first, his mother. He's a bit more forgiving of his father here than he was when they were face to face. He tells her what he's learned, that what the fates said was true. Any child born from those not of the underworld would die. When he was born, he was dead, and it was Mother Night Nyx who tirelessly worked to see him revived after Persephone departed. He doesn't know how she did it, but Nyx took a vow of secrecy and raised him as her own. It makes Persephone wonder what Nyx's angle is in all this, and they still don't understand why Hades and Nyx kept Zagreus a secret. He asks her if she had known that he was alive, would she have gone back to the underworld? Which, of course, she would have. So he questions, what if Hades didn't want her to go back? They're not able to discuss his question before he is again taken by the river Styx back to his father's house. He knows that Hades will not discuss Persephone in these halls. Their conversations need to be entirely private, and they're onto some very sensitive topics now that others shouldn't be overhearing. So he speaks to Nyx and finds himself lacking words. This being helped his mother in her darkest hour, helped Hades with an impossible request, put all her strength into reviving him by making a deal with her daughters, the Fates, took a vow of secrecy, and then lovingly raised another woman's child simply because it was asked of her. She gently tells him that she cannot further discuss such things, but when Zagreus asks if she defied her own daughters, she quickly chastises him and orders him to not question her daughters. The Fates are unspeakably powerful and difficult to understand at best. Even their mother has a fearful respect of them, but still, he asks her to thank them for him. The weapons Zagreus has been using, they have a sentience to them. The more he uses them, the more bonded they become. He's able to unlock deeper aspects of them, giving new advantages for the style of combat that he favors. Each one also possesses an unknown final aspect, which defies time. Each of these weapons will go on to, or already have, served some great figure in history. Should Zagreus unlock those secret aspects, he'll get a tiny peek into another time and place. In the underworld, things are pretty normal for a while. Usual interactions, normal gifting, mundane fighting, until he gets to Megara, except Meg isn't the one he meets here. It's another of the Furies, the really damn scary one, Tisiphone. He's happy to meet one of Meg's sisters, but all she says is murderer. Her job is torturing murderers, and if she was ordered to stop him, then he must be a murderer, right? Tisiphone is frighteningly hell-bent on doing her job. And of the three Furies, she has the fewest qualities shared with mortals. Tisiphone is why the Furies are so deeply feared, both on the surface and in the underworld. She cannot be reasoned with, spoken to, or understood, at least not by anybody besides her sisters. Her fight will take place across 3 arenas, with the venue changing at equal intervals, and each providing less space and cover than the last. She is brutal, a fight that he will want to end as quickly as possible without getting caught in her high-damage attacks. Vanquishing her doesn't result in her returning to the House of Hades via the river Styx. Instead, she disperses into green bats and leaves the area. Tisiphone is not welcome in the House of Hades. At his next meeting with his father on the surface, the two don't really stop to speak about family matters. Hades comments on the snow, this realm being held up by his, and the two start hurling attacks at one another. This is starting to feel less like I hate you and I want to hit you, and more like a real competitive interaction. Zagreus can be secure in knowing that he'll get his answers, so long as he doesn't give up, and Hades gets a relatively healthy outlet for his frustrations. Zagreus takes the victory and moves on to see his mother once more. Persephone greets him happily, as usual, and starts their talk right away. She wonders if Hades and Nyx wanted her out of the way, but Zagreus puts the brakes on that line of thinking. He does not believe that to even be possible, but he does wonder if she believed the two of them to be trustworthy. She did truly both believe them to be, but she can't deny that you really can't fully trust others. The prince agrees, but the way Hades and Nyx speak of her, they clearly cared about Persephone. It's hard to imagine either of them wanting to cause her pain. So what if both things are true? What if they withheld the truth from her and wanted to avoid causing hurt? Or more than that, what if Hades was trying to protect her? And the Olympians, none of them know anything about Persephone being here. Had Nyx really been tirelessly shrouding her this whole time? Persephone asks how he could know something like that, but his time is up. He'll have to fight his way all the way back once again, but first he needs to speak with his father. They deserve answers to these terrible questions. He knows that his father won't answer anything in the house where other ears might hear them speaking. But Zagreus loudly makes his statement towards Hades. His mother left because he never told her that her son was alive. The prince is going to see her again, asks if his father will cooperate, but Hades laughs and reminds him that they're not going to discuss things here, and the lord of this realm will hear no demands from his son. Nyx calls to him, though, for a private word, and inquires as to Persephone's well-being. He tells her what her little home is like, and about her lush garden under the sun. She's glad to hear that her old friend is doing well, and hopes that the two of them find his visits worthwhile. Zagreus decides that for a while he's going to focus on empowering himself and takes frequent, voluntary trips back to the house to speak with the folks there. It's time to slow down a bit, deepen friendships, try to figure out more of this family drama, do some renovations on the house. During a trip back, he catches Nyx and Hades having another of their arguments. Hades is upset that Persephone is being endangered somehow by Nyx's actions, and she very calmly tells him not to question her. She's not going to harm the queen. Zagreus butts in on this one, asking what she means by that, and Mother Night asks him directly, "Do you intend to betray the presence of your birth mother to the Olympians?" He says no, but because she seems happy where she is, no other reason, and that's not good enough for Hades. His lack of faith in his son is countered by Nyx, pointing out that the contact with Persephone had been possible because of him. He is worthy of their trust. End of discussion. The prince goes out on another venture, returns to the house a while later, and Hades is back at it with Nyx, trying to order her to stop all this. She is no longer to aid Zagreus, and she doesn't push back. She agrees that they have an understanding. She will remain committed to this realm and this house, and she acknowledges all Hades has done to aid her in her work. His response is a tactless one, a reminder that those who defy him end up in the lowest depths of Tartarus. This is probably going to turn into a fight that Zagreus had best stay out of. He learns more of the deep sadness of Orpheus, how the loss of his beloved, his muse, destroyed his ability to sing. Something happened between them long ago that tore them apart. A little later, he discloses that his muse was named Eurydice, the singing wood nymph in Asphodel. Zagreus doesn't give away that he knows her, though. He'll speak with her before doing that. On another trip out, Uncle Zeus mentions that he tried to set his father up with someone wholesome a long time ago, but it didn't work out. That's news to Zagreus, at least assuming that his Uncle Zeus was talking about Persephone. He was involved with her leaving Olympus. Athena later confirms that Zeus and Hades in particular had some sort of a falling out that even Zeus refuses to speak of. The guilt Zagreus has been feeling over misleading the Olympians has been deepening. He'll never be able to leave the underworld. They don't know what he's really doing down there. They think they're helping him escape his father. They're expecting him on Olympus one day. He's taking advantage of their good graces. At least for now, Nyx can keep them hidden, but they're going to have to face the issue of the Olympians sooner or later. In the arena of Megaera the Fury, the last sister is waiting, the youngest and most sadistic of them, Alecto. She is banned from the House of Hades for insubordination, and everything she seems to say is just unpleasant. She's petty, points out others' weaknesses, mocks anyone beneath her, which to her is everyone. She's just unrelentingly angry. It's in her nature to be that way. She punishes those who, in life, acted impulsively to commit crimes or immoral acts. Many in the underworld go out of their way to avoid Alecto at all costs, and her combat style is like a combination of the things that make Megara and Tisiphone dangerous. She is the last of the sisters that he faces off against, and he bests her in the first foray. When he meets his father on the surface, he doesn't get a chance to indulge in family discussions. His father pokes fun at him at how slow he was this time around, and Zagreus gets distracted. He sasses back, making fun of all the red cloaks he must hoard. It seems that while Zagreus has gotten tons of new tricks up his sleeve and adapted to the many challenges of the underworld, his father hasn't put in the same effort. The prince downs Hades in record time. In the Garden of Persephone, he's asked just how much he really knows about his family in Olympus. In his experience, they've been helpful, a bit vindictive, needy, off-putting, or strange at times, but they seem to generally mean well. She's horrified at the idea that Zagreus may be leading them straight to her. That Nyx is aiding him and his father opposes him solidifies their theory that Hades is trying to protect Persephone from something, that almost certainly being the Olympians. Nyx is powerful, but she's not all-powerful. If her strength wavered for just a moment, the Olympians would immediately find her. It could spark a war between Olympus and the underworld. His time has once again ended. They both have a lot to ponder until his next visit. At home, Hades actually inquires as to how Zagreus has been faring against the greatest king of Athens, Theseus. Probably expecting the prince to get riled up over it, but Zagreus jokes that Theseus was probably the only champion Hades could get to face him. The better ones were probably too busy, like Heracles. Zagreus wins the riling up match. Hades gets pissy at the mention of Heracles. Apparently there's some bad blood there, and Heracles is favored by Zeus. The prince stops to see Nyx and asks if she knows of a being called Chaos. They've been offering him interesting boons on his journey. She says she knows them well, and to be careful around them. They're not a deceptive being, but they are a trickster. At his next run-in with the Furies, all the sisters are actually together. Zagreus was firmly under the impression that the three of them couldn't stand to be in each other's company, or perhaps there was some major falling out between them. It's odd to see them all together like this, but it seems they've come to an arrangement when it comes to their obligations in stopping Zagreus. They'll team up, alternate turns, gang up based on his extreme measures. Megara is the primary fighter in this encounter, with her sisters dropping in to play support. It's a delightful level of chaos and difficulty, with the entire arena sometimes covered in damage-dealing effects. But once the primary fighter is downed, the other two Furies will leave the field. Zagreus takes victory and quickly moves on to the next level of the underworld. In Elysium, someone Zagreus has been expecting finally appears, Thanatos, Death Incarnate. Zagreus has known Thanatos his entire life. The Reaper is quite fond of the prince. So for Zagreus to just up and vanish without a word, without saying goodbye, was hurtful. To add to the insult, Zagreus starts their conversation by assuming that Thanatos is there to stop him. Instead, Death Incarnate challenges his dear friend to a competition. Who can take out the most minions of Hades? For a while, the two of them fight to get the killing blow on their enemies, not acting as foes to one another, but neither are they helpful. Zagreus manages to win this one, though in the future, he will have his fair share of losses against Thanatos. The Reaper calls out the prince's behavior. He left without saying goodbye. Did he just assume that Than would catch up with him sometime? Zagreus explains that what he did was best for himself, and he hoped that Thanatos would understand, but it doesn't soften the hurt that it caused. Since Zagreus wouldn't do it, Thanatos does. He says goodbye to his friend and leaves a gift upon his departure. On the surface, he confronts his father again, who remarks on Olympus aiding Zagreus. Without them, this wouldn't have been possible. His son asks if Hades let Persephone go because he feared retaliation from Olympus if their secret marriage was found out. And Hades doesn't lash out or get upset over the question. He challenges Zagreus. He asks him to think about why she left Olympus, or how, or better, ask her to tell the story. And Zagreus says something very hurtful in his obliviousness to the truth. He accuses his father of stealing her away. Hades doesn't deny it. He leans into it. He says yes, he took her. He took her to the underworld with him, and if it angers Zagreus, then let that anger out here. The prince's combat isn't clean like usual. He does manage to win, but just barely. A few more moments against Hades may have proven his undoing. His father warns him that the world he is seeking is far crueler than that of the underworld before he is taken back to the depths of Tartarus. His mother, Persephone, greets him as though she knows the questions he's going to ask already. She says that she couldn't stand it on Olympus. The other gods were unbearable, and her mother smothered her. She would have eventually left on her own. Zagreus tries to finish her sentence, saying that Hades stole her away to the underworld, but she gets an angry look about her. If that's what Hades is letting Zagreus believe, then he's still trying to protect her by keeping all the blame on himself. She informs her son that it was someone else who took her away from Olympus, and she chose to stay with Hades. The truth of that story needs to come from Hades, not her. Zagreus asks if she realized what she was committing herself to at the time, and she admits that she had a bit of a crush on the Lord of the Underworld, and it was awkward at first, but they got along eventually. If the gods of Olympus found out where she had been, they would accuse Hades of stealing her away just like Zagreus did, and a war would erupt. They both understand that Hades was trying to protect his family despite his own suffering, and the prince's time is up. He returns to the house of Hades, knowing in his heart that he needs to fix this broken family. The father and son don't have a lot to say to each other in the house. It's not safe to talk here anyways. But Nyx catches him before he leaves, and she swears that despite how everything may look, she always was true to Persephone and remembers her fondly. He asks his foster mother why she left then. Why did she really leave? And Nyx says that she knew Persephone felt like she didn't belong here. It was a hard adjustment for her to make, and she feared that her actions would bring war to the underworld. Zagreus is still trying to convince himself that Hades was a burden to his mother, but Nyx refuses to comment on such things. That is something that he needs to speak with his mother about. In the lounge, Megara reveals that her reunion with her sisters was possible because of him, because of his pact of punishment. He's forcing the Furies to work together, so in a way she can blame him for it, but also thank him for a chance to reconnect with her sisters. Megara is the bond that holds them together, the most reasonable and the eldest. With time, perhaps they can reforge a bond. In Elysium, after another run-in with Thanatos, Zagreus meets up with the god of swiftness Hermes, who reveals that, well, he knows Zagreus made it out to the surface. Hermes is of Olympus, but he also works with Charon the boatman in the underworld. He assures the prince that he won't be telling their kin on Olympus, though. He's wily and unpredictable, though it's doubtful that even Hermes would do something to anger Charon, and acting against the prince and Persephone would certainly upset him. At the next meeting with his father, he's asked if his suspicions were confirmed about Persephone's journey to the underworld. It's like he's issuing a challenge to Zagreus over it. The prince's response is shifting blame with unnecessary language. If not Hades, then one of his brothers on Olympus gave her to him as a consolation prize for being lord of the underworld. Hades outright defends Poseidon. He says the god of the sea is innocent, but he doesn't say anything about Zeus. He instead provokes his son into a fight. This time through, Zagreus fights with more focus, and he defeats his father with plenty of vitality to spare. Hades takes his defeat well and sinks into the river Styx. They'll be seeing each other soon enough. As soon as he has arrived in the garden of his mother, Persephone delivers a difficult request. She wants him to stop coming to the surface, for his safety and hers. She is in agreement with Hades. This family cannot be together. When her son pushes back and questions her, she admits her own guilt in all of this. She played a part in the family being torn apart. They cannot continue to expect Nyx to keep them concealed. If she slipped even once, just for a moment, they would all be found out. Zagreus asks her to return home with him, but her own fear and pride cloud her thoughts. Surely things couldn't be mended with Hades. Surely he must no longer love her. Surely the inhabitants of the underworld would reject her, and the risk of war is just too great. She tells him that this is her home now, and she's grateful to have met him, but asks that he does not return here. She says a firm goodbye, and Zagreus falls into the river Styx. He is having none of this, though. He's going to prove to his mother that Hades never stopped loving her. For as terrible a father as he was, Zagreus has seen the particular sadness of Hades when Persephone became a known figure to his son. He needs to get into his father's bedchamber to search for evidence that Hades never stopped loving her, but he is going to need help. He's not even certain if this is a problem that can be solved at this point, but Mother Night Nyx calls him over. She can sense that he is troubled, so he tells her everything, and she asks what is he going to do. He says he's going back, and her simple support to this is good. If she disapproved, she would voice it. His next journey out, he meets Eurydice again in Asphodel and talks a bit about Orpheus. He's the court musician who can't sing anymore. He misses her, his muse, terribly, but she doesn't seem thrilled at the mention of him. She tells Zagreus to ask Orpheus about the time he tried to save her from the underworld even though she was already dead. This seems to be a really, really sore topic, but Zagreus sort of sees himself as the fixer of relationships, so when next he sees Orpheus, he's going to get involved. Back on the surface, the two of them meet again. His father has been upset over how Zagreus spoke of Persephone, calling her a consolation prize. It's clear that he misses and still loves her, though he won't say the words. His son still harbors resentment over the choices his father made, but now at least he understands them and knows that it wasn't done out of maliciousness. Quite the opposite, in fact. He doesn't deny his mistakes to Zagreus, but hopes his son makes fewer of them during his long life than he has. At the end of their battle, upon his defeat, Hades reminds him that they are family. There's no escaping that. Zagreus takes that precise sentiment to his mother. She's surprised to see him, but the prince wastes no time in making his case to her. There has to be a way to fix everything, but she assures him that the love Hades and Persephone once had faded over time. But her son pushes back, says she's owed an apology from Hades himself and they can make amends. He declares that he is going to prove it. She insists that they made their choices, that they need to live with them, but he refuses again. This is his family too, and whether she likes it or not, they're all going to stop running from their problems and from one another. And that finally seems to get through to her, and for a moment, she seems inspired by him. But all too soon, he is taken back to the house of Hades by the river Styx. His father isn't at his desk, the halls are quiet. This is his chance. He goes to Achilles and asks him to let him into his father's chambers, and this is a steep request for the servant of the house. It could get him into catastrophic trouble with the god of the dead. Zagreus tells him that he doesn't know what he's looking for exactly, but he needs something that will prove Hades still thinks of and cares for Persephone. Achilles understands all too well the pain that a broken heart can bring, so he quickly slips Zagreus the keys to the house and orders him to just be fast about it. Within the private chambers of his father, he finds a closet full of red capes, just as he suspected, parchments and scrolls neatly piled, and a painting of Persephone at his bedside. These chambers are rather sparse. He left that picture there intentionally. That is the proof that he has been looking for. Housemaid and now friend Dusa catches the prince leaving the chambers, but she ain't no snitch. She pretends like she didn't see a thing. Zagreus is cleared from the room before his father has returned home. Success. Before he heads out, he asks Nyx about the danger his mother has been in, and she admits that she was in danger long before Nyx contacted the Olympians to help Zagreus. They needed his extended family's help in all of this, but if they found out the truth, there would be hellfire. They can continue to fool the Olympians for a while, but they will need to figure out a solution to all of this. During another trip back into the house after a failed attempt at taking on Charon the boatman, Zagreus asks Orpheus about Eurydice, and he's shocked that their paths crossed, almost in disbelief. But he doesn't really dwell on it. He just says, well. He doesn't want his wife to be bothered by news of him, which Zagreus is baffled by. Why wouldn't Orpheus want to make up with his wife? The prince's relations with his family on Olympus has been deepening and improving with each gift he gives. Even the aloof Artemis has grown pretty fond of him, and Demeter is opening up a bit more about the loss of her daughter, Kore, also known as Persephone. Zagreus hadn't put two and two together to realize that the daughter she'd spoken of was his mother, so Demeter is his grandmother, and if war broke out between Olympus and the underworld, the driving force behind it would be Demeter. On the surface, his father continues to try discouraging him from continuing to see his mother, but Zagreus is just as stubborn as he is. When he gets it in his head that he's going to do something, it seems pretty impossible to talk him out of it. They have a strangely familiar spat about the house renovations needing to be worked on, and then the swings begin again. Sometimes Hades just hits a stride against Zagreus and takes out huge chunks of his health in a very short amount of time. This confrontation almost ends badly for Zagreus, but he manages to hang on by a fraction of his final bit of vitality. The two of them will be seeing each other at home soon. He doesn't sound quite as upset or surprised about losing as he once did. And Persephone. When he arrives, she starts recounting the many things about the underworld that she tried to put aside, like Cerberus and how much she missed the Hound. The lack of sunlight was gentle, it was always warm, she remembers Nyx and her sons. Zagreus finally gets to reveal that his father never stopped loving her. He's kept her picture next to his bedside all these years, a very sentimental act from a very gloomy god. Despite all her doubts and fears, Persephone can't deny what is so clearly in front of her. She finally says the words out loud, and tells Zagreus more about her willingness to leave Olympus. Somehow, Uncle Zeus was involved, and thought he was doing her a favor in something that she actually wasn't given much of a choice in. Zagreus begs her to talk to Hades, or just visit for a while. His life is fading, but he assures her that they can figure out something to deal with Olympus. She falls back into her doubts of being welcomed back, and her boy's last words are a reminder that she is still the queen. Back at home, the prince asks his father about the name Demeter gave to Persephone at birth, Kore, and though he's a bit overly hostile about it, he warns his son that his mother despises that name and to not throw it around. Zagreus repeats back all the events of Persephone's vanishing from Olympus, but he is missing a few key points, and those very important details would make a war between the underworld and Olympus so much worse than Zagreus could currently expect. Hades still refuses to tell or even hint about it, though. Nyx answers a few questions about Hades and Persephone's relationship before he heads out. She informs him that when the queen was here, Hades was better. Her lightness affected him. At his core, he was always a difficult, temperamental ass, but far less so when his beloved queen was at his side. Zagreus tells her quite casually that he knows his mother loved Hades back, and that she cared for Cerberus and Nyx. In fact, she missed them, which gives Mother Night pause. Seems that she was unaware of that. The prince has a few rough runs to take him back home early, but it gives him the chance to casually catch up with folks. It's nice to hear their insights, their opinions, their lessons. Even his father has a few brashly interesting things to say. He also manages to kinda chance his way into convincing his dad to give him access to the administrative chamber again. See, that's where the contracts of the denizens of the underworld are stored. Achilles, Theseus, Sisyphus, Orpheus, all their underworld jobs and their agreements. His next run features the Fists of Malphon, the best weapon in his arsenal for sure. It carries him all the way back up to the surface faster than any previous run, and his father is quiet. He's off somehow. He laments to Zagreus that he tried to prevent all of this. He still expects war to erupt over it, but he acknowledges that his efforts were for nothing. Zagreus takes offense to it. They each think that they were doing the right thing and rather resent the other for defying their own opinions. Except this time, one of them finally gives in. Hades does. He tells Zagreus that there were things his son was right about, and standing in the prince's way is just delaying an inevitable, so he won't fight him anymore. He'll let him go see his mother in peace, but promises that if anything happens to Persephone, he won't hold back his wrath, even on Zagreus. Feels weird to just be walking away like this, but the prince goes in peace. And his mother has her bag packed. She says that she wanted to surprise him, that she's ready to go home now, back to the underworld, to reunite with her husband and Cerberus and Nyx. If they're quick about packing her things up, they can take the trip back down the river Styx together. She called in a favor with Charon, and the boatman has probably happily agreed to give her a ride home. Neither of them can quite believe that this is happening, that this sort of an outcome could have been possible. They have so much to talk about, but for now, they just enjoy their journey down the river Styx together. The music of Orpheus echoes throughout the caverns of the underworld. Though the musician has long been silent, his melody is clear as night, as though he and Eurydice are singing together to welcome the long-lost queen home. For a while, the three of them float down the river, enjoying a rare peace. At the doors to the house of Hades, Zagreus realizes that he knows how to get out, but not how to get back in, unless, he dies. But Persephone has to merely command the gates to open, and they respond. They enter through what was once her garden, an area Zagreus was never allowed to see. After all these years, it's still in fair condition. Awaiting her here, too, is her beloved hound and her estranged husband. The first welcome she gives is to Cerberus, who she's mentioned a few times, dearly missing. She ignores Hades when he tries to speak, instead giving her joy to Cerberus. Hades' apology doesn't fall on deaf ears, but Persephone tells him that he should too be apologizing to his son. He asks why she's returned. If Olympus discovered the truth of Persephone's whereabouts, not even Zeus could stop the repercussions. Persephone, though, she has a plan on how to settle things, which will require both Hades and Zagreus' cooperation. She stands firm against his doubts, with such confidence that it's hard to not believe in her. And of course, Hades will do anything Persephone asks, her first request being, talk to your son. Father and son both are a bit snippy at each other, which quite agitates the queen into scolding them both. And finally, Hades sets his pride aside and acknowledges the wrongs he's done against his son. His impatience, his lack of faith, his hypocrisy, but Zagreus wants him to take accountability for withholding truths. He sees his father as many things, one of them being honest. Hades admits that he deceived them both because he thought Persephone was better off. When Zagreus was returned to life, he stood by that choice even though it tore him up. The prince is shockingly quick to acknowledge it and move on. Forgiveness may take time, if ever it does come, but at least in this moment, he's ready for them to start their new lives together. His father actually asks if Zagreus will continue his breakout attempts. It seems the prince uncovered a number of major flaws in the underworld's security that need patched, for the sake of the queen, you know. And Persephone herself encourages it. They need to keep up appearances with the Olympians, and she has a plan brewing to fix everything. It will require Zagreus has the affections and trust of his family, but it's almost impossible to not adore the young god. Eventually, he'll have all their adoration, even Demeter herself if he tries hard enough. Zagreus pushes the absolute limits of the security measures within the underworld. For dozens and dozens of escape attempts, he amps up the pact of punishment conditions. Each death is more security for the underworld and another visit to friends and family at home. He too starts developing lasting bonds with his family on Olympus and with residents of the underworld. His mother and father seem more content by the day, the house gets almost fully renovated, and there's a happiness about everything. Even the fiery Megara seems to approve of the prince finding a line of work that's fulfilling to him. Again and again, Zagreus completes his runs to the surface and fights his father in a far more friendly competition of martial prowess. In Elysium, he learns that sad shade's name was Patroclus, and he knew Achilles in life. They deeply loved one another. Achilles was an unstoppable force on the battlefield, though in death, it isn't something he likes to remember or talk about. His death during the Trojan War tore him away from Patroclus. He was delivered to the fields of Elysium, but when Patroclus died soon after, Achilles made a deal with Hades. He would give up his eternity in Elysium so Patroclus could reside there in his stead, and the legendary Achilles entered into the service of the House of Hades as a shade. But Zagreus learns that Patroclus is deeply depressed and lonely. He doesn't know what happened to his Achilles. He couldn't find him here. Why wouldn't Achilles be in Elysium? The prince inserts himself into the issue, acting as a go-between for the two of them, talking about and teaching the other what's become of their beloved partner. Then, with the help of Mother Knight Nyx, he finds the service contract of Achilles, and he alters it so that he may visit Elysium to see his Patroclus. Of Sisyphus, he learns that his friend was once a king. In life, he was guilty of terrible, selfish things, and when his time came, he cheated death. Precisely what took place is a bit of a mystery, but the actions Sisyphus took against Thanatos caught him the ire of a few key gods that worked hand in hand with death, namely Ares. When Sisyphus was finally stopped and sent to the underworld, he landed himself in the lowest depth, doomed to eternally push a boulder up a hill, only for it to fall back down before ever reaching the top. From time to time, the Furies would visit him to punish him for his deeds in life. But over the many years he's spent here, Sisyphus changed and kind of went a little bonkers, actually. He was no longer cruel, he was welcoming to guests, always seemed to have a smile, and he made friends with Boldy, his boulder buddy. Boldy is always there to listen, to confide, to support. Boldy even becomes really good friends with the prince, too. Eventually, Zagreus alters his punishment pact, kept in the archives, so he'll no longer be tortured by the Furies. Sisyphus is given the option to leave the depths of Tartarus, but he chooses to stay with his dear friend Voldy in the end. Eurydice and Orpheus are a bit more of a challenge. After Eurydice died, her husband Orpheus tried to save her from the underworld. He was devastated by losing her. Hades agreed to allow this if he could make it out of the underworld without ever looking back. Orpheus did find Eurydice and nearly got her away from the underworld, but in the final stretch of the journey, Orpheus looked back, and she was lost to him. The great musician, too, was confined to the underworld, where he entered into the service of Hades as the court musician, but the loss of Eurydice destroyed his ability to ever sing again. Eurydice held a fair amount of resentment over this and didn't seem especially interested in being reunited with her husband. And Orpheus himself seemed resigned to his fate. Much like Hades, he didn't want to disturb his wife's peace. Eurydice does slowly come around after hearing about his deserved suffering and his inability to sing anymore since losing her, and Orpheus opens himself back up to the possibility of seeing his muse again. His service contract is altered by the prince, allowing the musician to venture to Asphodel to reunite with and make amends with Eurydice. While interacting with the being called Chaos, Zagreus learns that they are Mother Night Nyx's lone parent, and that something happened between them many ages ago that caused them to drift apart. They express to Zagreus that they regret this. Back then, they expected Nyx to shine bright even though she was the night. They missed their daughter and would like to reunite with her. It's really not hard to convince Mother Night. She too has felt their absence in her long life and is very willing to visit the realm of chaos to see them once again. One day, Zagreus outright asks his father to explain what happened when his mother came down from Olympus, and what his particular issue with Uncle Zeus is. Hades had thought Persephone had told the prince everything, but in his typical brooding way, he agrees to tell Zagreus the entire story in the privacy of his mother's garden. The two of them have perhaps the most blatant and honest conversation they've ever had. Hades tells Zagreus everything about how he came to rule the underworld alone, that his brother Zeus felt pity for him, and the king of Olympus actually kidnapped Persephone to deliver her to Hades as though she were an item to be given away. Hades was put into an awkward position, made more complicated when Persephone didn't actually want to leave. That's the piece that Zagreus has been missing in all of this. Zeus caused all of this. That's why a war with Olympus would be devastating. The gods up there would turn on each other too. Demeter would stop at nothing until everything was burned to the ground if it meant getting revenge for the pain inflicted on her. Betrayed by Zeus, her daughter, by Hades, and if Zagreus thinks Hades has a poor temper, he's in for a surprise when it comes to his brothers. Zagreus continues his breakout attempts, keeping all the secrets of his family at the forefront of his mind as he goes. Poseidon is always so boisterous and pleasant, but clearly a dangerous being. Dionysus is down to feast and play pranks, but he's moody and temperamental. His nature can flip immediately. Athena is powerful and wise, but too is she just. Her loyalty might not fall to Zeus if news of kidnapping and lies reached her ears. Aphrodite is impossible to read, but would certainly do whatever suited her own agendas the most. Artemis would almost certainly ally herself with Zagreus, as he is one of her few friends. Ares would be joyous at the prospect of war. Who knows where he would land in the fray? Hermes has dealings with both Olympus and the underworld, but he has so many secrets that he keeps. And Demeter would stop at nothing to see everyone she sees as an enemy destroyed. But Persephone said that she was going to figure this out, and one day she declares that they're ready to carry out her plan. Her son has fostered such incredibly positive relationships with the gods of Olympus, even her mother Demeter, and because of that, they have a chance. She declares that they are going to have a family dinner in the underworld, and Zagreus must extend invitations to each of the Olympians. Each will get a piece of the message, which will force them all to work together to figure out what Zagreus is trying to tell them. Even Chaos itself will be invited to attend. And they eat it up. Even Ares is enticed by the enigmatic partial invitation. As soon as each one has their message, they rush to find other family members to compare notes and piece it all together. Once the task is complete, Persephone fearlessly moves ahead with her plan, despite her husband's continued worries. He's afraid Zagreus didn't do something right, that Dionysus will ruin the house, but he needs to practice faith in the things that he can't control. Tasks are handed out to every staff member and house resident. Soon the scene is set, and all the gods of Olympus gather. Together, they all journey into the underworld for the first time. Persephone did not hide herself away, and presented herself to her long-lost family as the queen of the underworld. There was confusion as she told her story, but not anger. The queen omitted some troubling details from the tale, like how Zeus was involved. Can't have that one coming out, can we? She said that she eloped with Hades and mothered the rebellious Zagreus, who longed to connect with his family on Olympus. They were so moved by his efforts to reach the surface that they decided to help him by reaching out to all of them for help. At the conclusion of her story, Zeus gave a great laugh and welcomed them all back into the family, and each of the gods followed suit. The night was full of feasting and merriment. Even Demeter came to accept everything that happened. She was happy just to have her daughter back. In time, those broken old bonds would be mended like new.